Hello and welcome to the May 4th edition of the Bubb Report. I am Rion Charles, the Bubb Report's assistant producer. Artificial intelligence has recently become a hot topic of conversation internationally. Scientists and tech leaders warned about the perils that AI can pose to humankind. Geoffrey Hinton, one of the leading voices in the field of AI, announced he was quitting Google over his worries about what AI could eventually lead to if unchecked.
That was one ingredient. Another ingredient was the fact that things like ChatGPT know thousands of times more than any human in just sort of basic common sense knowledge. But they only have about 1 trillion connection strengths in their artificial neural nets. And we have about 100 trillion connection strengths in the brain. So with 100th as much storage capacity, it knew thousands of times more than us. And that strongly suggests that it's got a better way of getting information into the connections. And then a third thing was, very recently, a couple of months ago, I suddenly became convinced that the brain wasn't using as good a learning algorithm as these digital intelligences. And in particular, it wasn't as good because brains can't exchange information really fast, and these digital intelligences can. I can have one model running on 10,000 different bits of hardware. It's got the same connection strengths in every copy of the model on the different hardware. All the different agents running on the different hardware can all learn from different bits of data, but then they can communicate to each other what they learned just by copying the weights, because they all work identically, and brains aren't like that. So these guys can communicate at trillions of bits a second, and we can communicate at hundreds of bits a second via sentences. And so it's a huge difference, and it's why ChatGPT can learn thousands of times more than you can.
Closer to home in the Caribbean, experts opine that artificial intelligence will affect the socio-economic development of Caribbean countries like Grenada. Experts like Stacey Russell say that these countries are particularly susceptible because they tend to be labor-intensive economies and are therefore at risk of significant economic and social disruption from automation and artificial intelligence.
Started to think about an area that will touch on the lives of each and every one of us, and that is crime, that is policing, that is keeping our societies safe. It is about what our governments will do. Here we are talking about industry, but the government really has a big role to play in all of this in terms of regulation and in terms of leading the way in certain departments. And I think policing is one area.
Also on the report, we sit for an exclusive interview with Don Rojas, who served as Maurice Bishop's press secretary from 1981 to 1983 until the late Prime Minister's execution on Fort Rupert. During the early 80s, at the zenith of the Grenada Revolution, Rojas also served as editor-in-chief of Grenada's national newspaper, the Free West Indian. According to Marxists.org, Rojas narrowly escaped death during the October 19th assassinations of Bishop and other top leaders of the New Jewel movement. 4 days after the October 25th U.S. invasion of the island, Rojas and his family were rounded up by the occupation forces, interrogated, and then put on a U.S. Air Force plane bound for Barbados. We will reflect with Rojas on Maurice Bishop's legacy on the occasion of Bishop's birthday observation on May 29th. He would have turned 79 this year. And finally, we will be joined by social scientist Lorna Dale Charles to unpack her recent op-ed in which she argues that nepotism and patronage politics is undermining meritocracy in Grenada. We welcome our guests, Don Rojas, Maurice Bishop's former press secretary, Glenn John, software engineer and tech lead, Lorna Dale Charles, social scientist, and Kimron Corian, digital communication strategist. Here now is our host, Dr. Kellon Bubb, with this week's editorial titled Reimagining Juvenile Justice in Grenada. We thank you for joining us.
A pleasant good morning to our viewers and listeners, to our esteemed viewers and listeners of the Bubb Report. We do apologize as we do not have the editorial for this week teed up, but it will be aired on our pages after the airing of this week's program. Now, we want to take this opportunity to welcome our very first guest, Mr. Don Rojas. Rojas is an internationally respected journalist and intellectual. He was the former communications director of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People and the assistant director of communications of the National Urban League. He was also the former editor of Amsterdam News, New York City's oldest black-owned newspaper, founded in 1909. In the late 1970s, Rojas moved to Grenada from his native St. Vincent and the Grenadines, where he served as editor-in-chief of the national newspaper, The Free West Indian, and became Maurice Bishop's press secretary in the early 80s until Bishop's assassination in 1983. Rojas is also the founder of the Black World Today, the only internet portal dedicated to serving the Black community worldwide. With a career that stretches from Caribbean politics to European journalism and American business, Mr. Rojas is a fascinating figure and a role model to aspiring African American and Caribbean journalists. Though his roots are in the Caribbean, he attended college in the United States at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. There, he studied journalism and communications before embarking on an illustrious career shaped by both his progressive political leanings and his commitment to providing high quality independent journalism aimed at African American and global South audiences. At this time, I'm happy to be joined by Mr. Don Rojas. Mr. Rojas, welcome to the Bubb Report.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bubb. It's a pleasure and an honor to join you this morning.
Absolutely. Now, Mr. Rojas, we invited you here on the program because last week Maurice Bishop celebrated his posthumous birthday. He turned 79, of course, Maurice Bishop being the second Prime Minister of Grenada. And of course, outside of my introduction, we know who you are professionally, but talk to us about how you got involved with Grenadian civic life.
Well, I spent a number of years as a teenager growing up in Grenada. I attended the Presentation Brothers College just about the same time that the former Prime Minister Maurice Bishop also was at that college. And we became friends, although he was a little bit older than I was at the time. We both our families teenager in PBC, always looked up to Maurice. He was clearly at that time the recognized and respected leader of the students in so many ways. He headed up the debating society. He was a member of the tennis team of PBC. He helped to edit the student publication at the college. And so we got to know each other, of course, from when we were young. And then we went our separate ways as we grew older. Maurice went to England to study law. I came to the United States. We had lost contact with each other for a number of years up until 1970s. And then, of course, the historic event of the Grenada Revolution coming to power took place on March 13th, 1979. I was working at the time in New York. I was editing the New York Amsterdam News. And I followed the events very, very closely. When the Gary regime was overthrown, and in the months subsequent to March of 1979, I observed a number of very progressive and very exciting initiatives that had been launched by the People's Revolutionary Government under the leadership of Maurice Bishop. Fast forward to September of that same year, 1979, the Prime Minister came to New York to address the General Assembly of the United Nations. And I was able to interview him for a newspaper and also for a radio program I was hosting at the time. So Carrie Beats, it was on a station known to a lot of Caribbean people in New York, WLIB. With a call. And in the course of the conversations off air, off record, we caught up with what was going on in Grenada. And Prime Minister Bishop at the time, he said, look, if you ever have any interest in returning to Grenada, we certainly can use someone with your experiences and your skills to help us build a communications infrastructure for the Grenada Revolution. I said, that's an intriguing thought, and I certainly would give it a lot of consideration. And then he went back to Grenada. About 10 days later, I received a call from the Grenada's ambassador to the United Nations at the time, Brother Kenrick Radix, who was passed soul. And he said, look, the Prime Minister would like to talk with you more about that conversation he recently had in New York. And so we did. And he said, look, if it's at all possible, can you come down to Grenada and as soon as possible to help us out with our communications work? And I did. Within 10 days, I was in Grenada. I resigned my job at the Amsterdam News, left my family in New York temporarily, and went to Grenada to begin helping to build the Grenada Revolution. And so that's how I returned to Grenada under those circumstances. And the first 2 years, as you said in the introduction, Free West Indian, which at the time was the official newspaper of the state, the official newspaper of the revolution. I edited the paper for 2 years, and then I moved on to become the Prime Minister's press secretary. And in that capacity, I was responsible for organizing media interviews, press conferences, helped to write speeches for Prime Minister Bishop, and of course traveled with him extensively around the world in those 2 years. So, and then of course the tragic events of October of 1983 occurred, and as they say, the rest is history.
The rest is history, and I consider you living history, sir. In essence, you answered the call to serve.
Yes.
I was not aware that you attended Presentation Brothers College. Was your principal Brother Ligori, or
Yes.
was it Brother Leonard? Who was it?
Yes, yes, of course. It was run by the school at the time. Was run by by Irish brothers, and we also had some very Grenadian local teachers at the school when I was there. It was a very pleasant few years, and then we moved on from there to. My father was a radio broadcaster, and we moved around the Caribbean quite often, living and working. My dad in places like St. Lucia and St. Vincent. And back in those days, there was a thing called the Windward Island Broadcasting Service, WIB, in Grenada, but covered news events in the four of the Windward Islands extensively. And my dad at the time was one of the pioneers of the radio of the news program on WIBS Webs. So yeah, history there.
Absolutely. Now let us talk about, now on May 29th of this year, as we said in the intro, Bishop would have celebrated his 79th birthday. Now, the Black Nation Journal back in 1984 is quoted as saying that you narrowly escaped death during the October 19th events.
Yes.
It also quotes you as being one of the last people to communicate with Bishop before his execution. Can you
Yes.
take us back to that day, Mr. Rojas? What were your interactions and communication with Bishop like? And what did he say to you? Do you remember what his last conversation was with you?
Yes, his last conversation was, look, we need to get the word out to the rest of the world that the people had freedom from his house arrest, and that he was preparing to address a mass later that day in St. George's.
Mhm.
So I made my way to the telephone company, which was located on the Carronage area at the time, and I was able to make a number of calls. I got in touch, first of all, with the Caribbean News Agency, which was headquartered in Barbados, and also with Reuters, the international news agency. While I was in the process of making those calls, the attack on the fort took place. And from the window of the company, I had a straight line of vision view of the fort. I was able to see people jumping off of the high walls, jumping, hopefully, I mean, some of them, of course, probably jumped to their death. I heard the gunshots, but I could not determine what the fate of the prime minister and the others who were with him was until much later that day in the evening, when it was announced by the late Hudson Austin on Radio Free Grenada that the prime minister and several others had been killed, did not use the word assassinated, had been killed in a crossfire between Bishop and those who were still supporting him, and the soldiers from the People's Revolutionary Army who had attacked, retake the fort. So immediately after that took place, I went into hiding, and then discovered a few hours later that the prime minister and the other martyrs had been brutally shot down, assassinated, lined up against the wall and assassinated. It was a horrific occurrence. Nothing like that had ever happened in the history of Grenada, indeed in the history of the entire English-speaking Caribbean. And of course, it shocked and traumatized the Grenadian people. It was, in fact, objectively an act of terror at the people of Grenada at the time. It shocked and terrorized the entire Caribbean community. And the ramifications continue to ripple today, 40 years later. And I'm very, very pleased the current government, Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell, intends to memorialize those tragic 40 years later, this coming October. The memory and the legacy of Bishop needs to be upheld, needs to be to have a pride of place in Grenada's history. That 4.5-year period from 1979 to 1983, I would say was one of the most significant historical periods for Grenada, and indeed for the entire Caribbean region.
So you said you went into hiding. Was there a bounty out for your arrest given your role with the administration at the time?
There was, yes, I learned later on that the judges who were searching for me to not just arrest me, but to shoot me on sight. A group of soldiers came to my home at 2 in the morning. We were living at the time in one of the Carifta cottages. Those are no longer there in the Grand Anse area. and I, of course, was not in the building in my home at the time, but my wife and my children were there, and they arrested my wife and took her to the fort, where she was detained right up until October the 25th, the day of the U.S. invasion. So it was, of course, a very painful period, not only for myself but for my entire family. And then a few days later, my family and I were rounded up, taken to the site of the what was called Point Celine Airport, now Maurice Bishop International Airport. The airport at the time was almost completed. I would say probably 80 to 90% completed. And that's where the U.S. military set up their military headquarters during the invasion of Grenada. So my children and myself were sent over to Barbados, and there Barbados government were not very pleased that I was in their country, so they only gave me 10 days to stay there.
Because at the time, Barbados at the time had a reactionary government.
Yes, it was the government of former Prime Minister Tom Adams, and it was one of the CARICOM countries that supported the invasion of Grenada. And prior to that, along with Jamaica at the time, which was headed up by former Prime Minister Edward Seaga, they were the two countries, along with Dominica, who was headed up Prime Minister Eugenia Charles at the time. Those three countries were extremely hostile towards the Grenada Revolution throughout the period of 4.5 years. So when Barbados became the staging ground, so to speak, for the U.S. invasion of Grenada. So those countries a supportive role of the invasion against Grenada back 40 years ago.
But let's fast forward to, I believe it was 1988. I was reading in my background research on you that you attempted to re-enter Grenada and you were denied entry.
Yes.
Talk to us about that.
Yes, indeed. This I went back to Grenada in the hope that I would be able to attend the launch of the Maurice Bishop under the leadership of Dr. Terry Marichaud back then, and he still is, I think, the leader of the MBPM. I arrived in Grenada from Barbados. I checked in with the immigration, looked at my passport, the immigration desk recognized my name. He said to me, "You know, Mr. Rojas, I used to be one of your wife's students. My wife taught for a while at GBSS while we were in Grenada." And he said, "But I have to consult with my superiors before into the country." So he went and made a call. I think he spoke to the then Prime Minister, Mr. Herbert Blaise.
A friend of Ronald Reagan.
Yes. And he came back a few minutes later and he said, "I'm sorry, but I have been told by the Minister of National Security, who was the Prime Minister, that you persona non grata, you cannot enter Grenada at the time. And so you will have to leave." Now, I came in on the very last flight that day to the police headquarters, and I spent the night there. I requested to make a phone call to Dr. Marichaud. That request was denied. And at the crack of dawn the next morning, I was escorted by armed police officers back to the airport and put onto the very first plane leaving Grenada for Barbados. I was actually escorted by armed police officers onto the plane. So that was my 24-hour sojourn back in 1988. Unfortunately, was not able to participate in the launch of
of the Maurice Bishop patriotic movement. Yeah. That is interesting. I suspect you have been in the post-Blaze era. You have been to Grenada since.
Yes, I was in Grenada 4 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
2018. Yes, my wife and I, a number of our children and grandchildren, we went back for the joyful occasion of the wedding of one of our oldest granddaughter. And so it was a delight to be back in Grenada and to participate in the wedding itself for about a week. And after the ceremonies and the festivities, we returned to the U.S.
Now you had a front row seat, Mr. Rojas, to Maurice and his management style, his leadership style. Talk to us about his approach to communicating and the role that you played in shoring up his charismatic communication style. Now, I heard from someone who also worked within the press circle, Margaret Francis. I'm not too sure if you remember Margaret Francis, but she indicated that Maurice was very hands-on in respect of ensuring that the messaging of the People's Revolutionary Government reflected an international aesthetic, that it was meant to appeal to the international community. And so he was very, very hands-on in ensuring that whatever messaging was representing Grenada, that messaging was very effective. Is that your
Yes, indeed. And of course, he was a master communicator. He was an extremely eloquent person and a public speaker of the highest caliber, not only in terms of Grenadian standards, but Caribbean standards and global standards. He was a man who had the ability to articulate the hires of the Grenadian people at the time. He made a number of very famous speeches all over the world, some of which have been quoted over and over. In No One's Backyard, for example, was a quote from one of his speeches. And I worked closely with him to help craft the messaging that he would be comfortable with because of the revolution. A very brilliant mind Bishop had, but also an extremely friendly and sociable person. It was a joy to work with him. He had a great sense of humor. Of course, work came first, and the revolution's business came first. But he was someone who could relax over a game of cards and a drink and just have a good time. I've seen him in those situations on so many occasions. Also witnessed him interfacing dialogue with some of the greatest leaders around the world at the time, particularly in the so-called third world or the developing world. I witnessed him firsthand in conversation. The former president Fidel Castro of Cuba with Arafat of the PLO back in those days, with the leaders of nations both in the Western world and in and everywhere he went, everywhere he spoke, he was received and welcomed as a fresh, young, brilliant third world leader that had arrived on the scene, that was speaking truth to power, so to speak. He was indeed very forceful in articulating that Grenada was a sovereign, independent country, and that we had the right to determine our destiny, to determine the direction in which we wanted to develop Grenada. And the big powers such as the United States and the European powers, in spite of their size and their weight in geopolitics, they did not have the right to interfere in the domestic affairs of sovereign Grenada. He made that very clear on so many occasions. I remember clearly at a non-aligned summit meeting in New Delhi in India, when he got up to speak, the entire, including all of the heads of state who were there at the time, probably at least 70 or 75 from around the world, particularly from places like Africa and Asia and Latin America, they all stood up and gave him a wonderful ovation. It was, of course, not just him that they were showing their respect for, but for and those in Grenada who supported the revolution at the time. And let's just remember, in spite of the the tragic events that took place in October of 1979, the Grenada Revolution, and particularly Prime Minister Maurice Bishop, remained very popular among the Grenadian masses. So, as Fidel Castro once said, Grenada was a small country with a big revolution. This tiny Caribbean island was punching above its weight, so to speak, in spite of its size. So it grew into a moral example. Grenada had become a moral example of how a young, independent, former colonial countries could begin to chart into a bright future, determined by its own people and not by large outside powers influencing it.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of Maurice Bishop, and incidentally, I have I believe this is the newest edition of Maurice Bishop Speaks. I had to get my copy because my original copy was lost during Hurricane Ivan.
Right.
And I'm going to quote from one of the speeches, which I suspect you helped craft, on page 246. And this speech was delivered at the launch of one of the Center for Popular Education programs in St. Andrew. It doesn't tell me where exactly in St. Andrew, but in closing, Maurice Bishop said, quote, "I end by repeating that our country cannot go forward if there is a substantial number of our people who cannot read or write. In order to prepare for the kind of society we are trying to build, in order to achieve the greater and greater levels of production we must aim at, all of us must be developed. We all have to raise our levels of knowledge, our levels of consciousness, our levels of efficiency, and our levels of understanding. We cannot build Grenada on the basis where 3/4 of the people who could read and write and the other quarter cannot." Talk to me about the role of the revolution in really enhancing adult literacy in Grenada.
Yeah, no, it was one of the most significant achievements of the revolutionary process. The launch of the Center for Popular Education, which of course was an initiative that was managed under the Ministry of Education, and Minister Jacqueline Kreft, who was the Minister of Education at the time, was very involved in establishing. It was recognized as Maurice said in that quote, that Grenada could not really fully exploit the potential of its people if a quarter of their population was functionally illiterate. So lowering the literacy rate became a top domestic policy priority for the revolution, and it did, in fact, in that short period of time, significantly reduce those rates. In addition to that, there are other indices of social well-being that got a lot of attention from the People's Revolutionary Government. The need to provide quality healthcare at an affordable cost of Grenadian for the PRG. And in this particular regard, back then, the revolutionary government of Cuba was extremely supportive in that regard by sending a number of doctors, Cuban trained doctors and nurses and dentists, etc., to Grenada to, in fact, work with the government to provide these services, healthcare services, free of charge to the people of Grenada or in every parish. So that that kind of solidarity support from Cuba made a tremendous impact on the quality of life of so many of our Grenadian sisters and brothers at the time.
Absolutely. And two final questions, Mr. Rojas. In mid-April, the International Black World Institute, that organization held a tribute to Maurice Bishop on its opening day. I had the pleasure of attending the event in Baltimore, Maryland. Talk to us about
Yes.
why it was necessary in the 40th year, at least, of the of the founding of the Grenada Revolution, for you and the Blackwell Institute to have such an event honoring Maurice Bishop.
Yes. This was a historic conference in many respects. uh, and it so happened that it was occurring in the 40th anniversary of the tragic events of October 1983 in Grenada. So the organizers of this conference, given that this was a conference that was going to involve um, Africa, people of African descent from all over the world. There were delegates there from Africa, from Europe, from Latin America, and of course from the African American population here in the United States. Many people in this community had respected Maurice Bishop as an iconic figure in third world and developing world politics. And so it was thought that this would be a fitting moment to lift up Bishop's legacy, to remind the world that he made and his government made, and the revolution as a whole made a significant of the Caribbean, and that the revolution had a tremendous impact on global politics. And so we reached out to the government of Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell with a request for him to come to the conference, to be physically present at the conference, and to deliver a tribute to Maurice Bishop. Unfortunately, at the last minute, the Prime Minister could not physically attend and join us in Baltimore, but he did send a video greeting, which was very, very well done, beautifully produced, and it was played at one of the town hall meetings during the conference, and was extremely well received by the. So we are very grateful that the current Grenada government positive manner to our invitation, and it was again fitting that Bishop's memory and the legacy of the revolution be lifted up. We should not ever forget what took place in Grenada in those 4.5 years. So this this conference was, which happens every 4 years in different parts of the U.S., was determined to use this opportunity to keep Bishop's legacy and the legacy of the Grenada Revolution alive.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And before we get to some closing comments, we do have some comments here from our viewers and listeners. One viewer is saying, good morning, Comrade Rojas. As one who served in the PRG, how can you compare the first year of this administration, meaning the Deacon Mitchell administration, to the first year of the Grenada Revolution? That is the essence. Are you able to see, for example, comparisons between the programs articulated by this administration with the programs articulated by the People's Revolutionary Government of Maurice Bishop?
Thank you for that question. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be in a position to give the viewer a very detailed answer because I'm not there on the ground in Grenada, witnessing and observing how the policies of the Dick and Mitchell government are being implemented. But from what I understand from a distance, as an observer, as an outside observer, the new government is off to a good start. I was able to view an event that took place in Grenada with regard to public that was expressed by Laura Trevelyan from the British former slave-owning family that had owned, I think, over 1,000 enslaved Africans on their plantations in Grenada during the days of slavery. And as you know, the reparations movement in the Caribbean and around the world is a hot topic these days. It is Grenada is going to play and has played and will continue to play a very significant role in bringing the reparations movement to more and more to the forefront of public discourse. The Trevelyan family came down to Grenada to present an apology to the Grenadian people, to the Prime Minister, on behalf for their role in those days. It was, I think, a very significant event that took place there, and the Prime Minister recommitted his government to advancing the reparations movement and to continuing to support the Grenada Reparations Commission, led by Brother Ali Gill. So we were very pleased to witness that particular event and to listen to the speeches of Brother Gill, the Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies, Sir Hilary Beckles, who is also the chairman of the CARICOM Reparations Commission, was for that occasion and gave a very brilliant speech. And then, of course, the comments by the Prime Minister himself, we think were appropriate and relevant. Other than that, I cannot position to comment on the policy initiatives that are being rolled out or have been rolled out in the first year of the Mitchell administration in Grenada. But I want to wish the Prime Minister and his government much success as his term progresses. And we look forward to October later this year. He has announced that his government will undertake a series of memorial events that will commemorate the life and the legacy of Maurice Bishop and the martyrs who were assassinated 40 years ago. So these are all very positive initiatives in our perspective, and we want to commend the government for that, and we look forward to further successes in the months and years ahead.
Mr. Rojas, it's such a pleasure and an honor speaking to you. I read about you in journals, in books. I saw you on Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman several occasions. Amy is one of my heroes. I happen to adopt my epistemic role as a communicator through the lens of independent media and journalism. And you and people like Amy Goodman and others are of that ilk. So it's such a pleasure having you here, sir. Is there any final comments before we get to the next segment?
Well, again, just thank you so much for allowing me a few minutes to speak to the Grenadian people through your excellent program. I commend you for the work that you're doing. It's very professionally produced, and you are bringing into the arena of public discourse some of the most critical issues facing not only the people of Grenada, but the people of our English-speaking Caribbean. So kudos on your work, and continue to do that. It'll just grow from strength to strength. I am confident
Absolutely.
of that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the vote of confidence, Mr. Rojas. That means a lot. And thank you for your service to not only Grenada, not only the Grenadian national community, but the international community, especially those of us who belong to the African diaspora, wherever we may find ourselves. So thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Dr. Bubb.
Viewers and listeners, Mr. Don Rojas, who was Maurice Bishop's former press secretary. Mr. Rojas also has an extensive and storied career in journalism, communications, and communications for development. And so at this time, what we will do is we will take a quick break, and then we will come back with our panel segment of the week. Please stand by.
There's nothing new in technology transforming the economy, from the steam engine to the smartphone. But few innovations promise change as fast or fundamental as artificial intelligence, the stuff of science fiction that's fast becoming a fact of working life.
I would definitely say that's something that we should do.
When you pick up the phone to a company, this is what you hope you'll get. A human to help.
Sure, I can set that up for you over the phone.
But send an email to Octopus Energy, and the answer might now start with AI. It's answering 44% of customer emails just 7 weeks after it was introduced.
It's read every email we've ever sent to a customer. It's read every training manual we've ever used with our team. It's read every bit of regulation. It's read every bit of the arcane back end of energy. It kind of just knows it all, right?
The boss says it won't cost jobs here, is a threat to workers in the wider economy.
Around the world, governments are quite quickly beginning to think about what they have to do here. But we haven't got time to wait and see, because look, if a freight train's coming at you, you don't wait till you feel it hit before moving out of the way. That'll be too late. The first thing we need to think about is this economic dislocation, risk to jobs.
Generative AI is changing the workplace fast. This London law firm has a bespoke AI tool being used by 3,500 lawyers in 43 countries just 3 months after it was launched.
We underestimate its capabilities all the time, and then someone will send an email going, I just got the most amazing answer, or I just found this use case. It still happens a lot. On an individual basis, it's a boring productivity gain, really. It's an hour or two a week, but when you multiply that by 3,500, that is a big deal for a business.
What, before this existed, would that have been a realistic target if you'd been asked to find, go off and find me 3,500 hours?
It's impossible. It was impossible to find these productivity gains through a single deployment of a system a year ago. We couldn't have done this.
You can see when the prompt is right, the percentage of you rolling the dice and generating what you want is higher. And that is the prompt crafting process.
AI is transforming design too. Architects used to sketch their inspirations onto napkins and envelopes. Now, AI can produce thousands of design possibilities, drawing on millions of real-life pictures prompted by text or images.
I have to admit, there's always a certain percentage of fear that always exists, just because I feel it's so revolutionary right now. And I can see it replacing certain elements of certain jobs, meaning that the people who are not currently looking into AI will realize it's taking over and will be a bit caught off guard by it. It's just a matter of being able to find the right methodologies to understand the algorithm, how it thinks, and be able to direct it so that you don't allow the AI to control you or the output, but you actually curate the results.
Viewers and listeners, welcome back. Now, for our next segment, we are discussing artificial intelligence, or AI. Artificial intelligence is expected to affect the socioeconomic development of nations across the globe. Caribbean countries are particularly susceptible because they tend to be labor-intensive economies and are therefore at risk of significant economic and social disruption from automation and AI. Here to make sense of these realities are Kimran Kurian and Glenn John. Glenn John's adoration for technology started over 25 years ago as a student of the Presentation Brothers College, my alma mater, and continuing through T.A. Marisho Community College, where he studied information technology and computer science. He holds a bachelor's degree in computer science from Florida Tech University and built his career spanning 20 plus years across Microsoft, where he made significant contributions right after graduation, working in the Microsoft Office Productivity Division, then at Amazon, working on the Alexa product, and currently at Meta, formerly Facebook, working within the ads division. Our next guest is Mr. Kimran Kurian, who is a leading authority on social media and digital communication. With over 9 years of experience in the digital space, he is widely recognized as one of the top social media strategists in the Caribbean. Mr. Kurian holds a master's degree in digital media from the Toronto Metropolitan University, formerly Ryerson University, and a postgraduate diploma in digital business from the Emeritus Institute with the MIT, Executive Education, and as well as the Columbia Business School. I'm happy to be joined by these two very knowledgeable gentlemen, Mr. Kurian and Mr. John. Welcome to the Bubb Report, gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Likewise.
And Glenn, I know you are on the West Coast, so it's after 8 in the morning. So I thank you for waking up early on a Sunday to join me here.
Yes. My pleasure.
Absolutely. Now, gentlemen, artificial intelligence and AI, it's a conversation that I believe you gentlemen are having, but I believe it's a conversation that needs wider fleshing out, wider education on. And so I want to begin through the lens of a techno-optimist. Techno-optimists welcome AI as they have welcomed other evolutions in technology. Yes? However, those who are the techno-pessimists will say that artificial intelligence will disrupt and upend life as we know it. As techno-optimists, how do you articulate the view that the disruption will be an opportunity for us to evolve and improve significantly? Kimran, I want to start with you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Bob. So the first thing I want to say is that artificial intelligence is not new, okay? As a matter of fact, the term artificial intelligence was coined in 1956 at the Dartmouth Conference when people like Newell and John McCarthy were trying to find ways to use machines to generate human intelligence. So artificial intelligence is not new. What we are seeing now is a kind of a resurgence of AI and using AI for everyday tasks. Now, as we are aware, whenever there is a technological revolution or whenever there is technological enhancement, there are concerns about job losses and other things happening. Take a look at the Industrial Revolution. When the Industrial Revolution happened, we had people who were working on like the farms and so were being displaced. Their jobs were being taken away by machines and so. However, with the efficiencies that came about as a result of the new technologies, they were able to find jobs in different areas. And I think it's the same thing that will happen in artificial intelligence, in the sense that, yes, there are going to be, like job displacements and so happening, but we will see new jobs being created that will sort of make up for all the loss that's happening. And we have to remember that we use AI every day outside of this new sort of big hoopla on AI. We use Siri, we use Alexa. These are all AI tools. So AI is nothing new that people are coming out and saying, "Oh well, wow, this we are going to be losing here, losing there because of AI."
Let me bring in Mr. John here. Glenn, let us talk about this. You had a front row seat in the software engineering space, having worked at Microsoft for many years before you went into early retirement. We will talk about that. That would be for another segment, because I believe the formula for early retirement, you need to teach us that formula so that we don't retire when we get to 60. But as someone obviously who worked at Microsoft, you obviously would appreciate the functioning of AI at that level. So talk to us about how we should be embracing these new changes that people tend to have a moral panic about.
Yeah. Well, let me start off by saying the retirement hasn't happened yet, so still actively working, but it'll happen at some point. Yes. So in general, right? I want to sort of differentiate between a couple things when we're talking AI. So like Kimron mentioned, way back in the 50s, this term was coined, and it was the intention of that was really around having artificial intelligence that could learn to do anything that a human is capable of doing, right? Any sort of intelligent task that a human is capable of doing. And so the sort of classic examples of that, well, fictional classic examples now are things like the Terminator series of movies, right? So the Terminator, there is an AI, and it's a self-aware AI. You could pretty much do anything that a human can do, and better in some regards. Or Rosie from the Jetsons, right? Those are like the classic sort of human replacing sort of AI. And there's a bunch of panic around that sort of AI when people think about it, because now you're thinking about, well, AI not only displacing jobs, but potentially sort of human elimination type scenarios. I believe that sort of AI, which is called like artificial general intelligence, is decades away. There's arguments of whether it would ever happen or it could happen next year. So there's a wide range of views on that. But I think to sort of focus the discussion today, the one that we want to talk about is probably sort of narrow AI or generative AI or deep learning. You'd hear all these terms sort of been spewed around, and that is really AI that is focused on purpose-driven AI. Right. So it is focused on a particular thing, solving a specific problem. So if you know of Roomba vacuums, for instance, those are things that automatically clean your floors at home. That's a purpose-driven AI. It's supposed to be intelligent, to know where to go and how to clean, how often, etc., and be able to map your room space. It's not a general AI that's going to, has motivations or takes over the world. And so in the context of narrow AI, of which things like ChatGPT, which is the, sort of new hotness, there are a lot of moral concerns, from various people, and a lot of it is justified, meaning particularly around the job displacement bits of it. So there are particular industries that are susceptible to job loss, and we could talk more in depth about those. There are also sort of ethical concerns around how we train that AI to be sort of diverse. There's a lot of garbage in, garbage out. So if you train AI using biased data, they will behave in biased ways. And so you have to be careful around that stuff and around incomplete data and misinformation. So there's a lot we could sort of get into. So there's a lot of concerns around AI. That being said, like you said, I'm a techno optimist, right? And when we look at the sort of the potential benefits in the long term of the productivity gains, which yes can cause job displacements, but also sort of the new jobs that are starting to pop up as a result. So you have this thing like prompt engineering, which is a term that no one has heard of, except for the last few years, but actually sort of, these are well-paying jobs that are needed in support of these AI advances. And so there's a lot we could talk about and go into detail. But I am optimistic that these changes and these advances are creating opportunities across a myriad of industries. And we could get into that here.
Yeah, absolutely. But before, and I want to bring back Kimran into the conversation. And viewers and listeners, please share this conversation. I think it's a very important conversation. It's not as sexy and exciting as the political discourses that tend to happen sometimes, and people accuse us of not doing other things. Well, this is a topic. That's another thing that's also very important. But let us. I'm going to share an article here that speaks to the concern that who is the gentleman has been coined as the godfather of AI. That's Geoffrey Hinton, who we teed up in the intro, and he said, right now they are not more intelligent than us, as far as I can tell, but I think they soon may be. He also accepted that his age had played into his decision to leave tech giant Google. Of course, he talks about that. But in essence, this article talks about what he envisions as a future where artificial intelligence can perhaps get out of hand, such that it may affect embers of humanity in significant ways. Kimran, I want to get your thoughts, and he's not the only one. There are several people within that space who have also expressed concerns. Let's get Kimran to reply to this, first of all.
So the concerns are valid. At the end of the day, the concerns are valid. But so he's right in the sense that right now, the AI is not more intelligent than us because the AI has to take the data that we as human beings put into it in order to be able to generate any kind of output that we want from it. So it's humans that are programming the artificial intelligence. So as Glenn said, whatever you put in, you get out. If you put in biased data, you get biased responses. So I know the concern that he has, I would say, is valid. However, my view on it is the artificial intelligence, AI systems and tools is here, and we just have to ensure that we are creating mechanisms to manage this. That's the reason why you have what you call AI ethicists. These are the people that are looking at the ethical implications and considerations surrounding AI. And so there are valid concerns about AI getting smarter than human beings. There are if I don't know if you saw this recently, but we've seen situations where AI is going up against chess masters and beating them. AI is going up against Jeopardy professionals beating them, and so on. So the artificial intelligence, because of the amount of data that it has, yes, it may come across as smarter than a human being. But remember, at the end of the day, it's all about how we program the data, and that's the reason why as humans we have to put things in place to guard against everything that the AI can and cannot do or isn't capable of. Now, if AI is allowed to keep, I suppose, advancing, then we might find a situation where AI might. Well, I know there's a concern that it might become self-aware,
that it would become a sentient being.
Yes.
And one of the Alexa designers here can perhaps talk about that, about it being a sentient being. But these you mentioned, Kimran, that these concerns are valid, and you reference in your articulation here notions of bias. Now, while doing my graduate work at Harvard University, we read Sophia Noble's Algorithm of the Oppressed, and what it talks about is just the biased nature of technology, especially in the ways that it affects Black and brown people. So, Glenn, I want you to talk about that. How do we set up guardrails to ensure that these challenges with AI do not affect human civilization, especially in the way that it would affect people that look like us.
Yeah. I'll do a little bit of a politician thing here and go back quickly to your previous question and then come forward to this one. So yeah, just sort of quickly on the other one, the whole discussion is really again centered on sort of general, that Hinton is having, and he's knows 100x what I could possibly know in this area. But I do think that sort of or panic around the artificial general intelligence, like AI truly being more intelligent than humans, I actually think that is likely not to happen in my lifetime, for a variety of reasons. Like today, AI, none of these AI tools, including ChatGPT, actually has understanding. It has knowledge, but zero understanding. Meaning, like, you could sort of define it understands as a bunch of words on paper, and it understands the definition of each word, but it actually doesn't understand what a sentence actually means. And there are tests that can sort of prove that in the industry. Things that like a 4-year-old would be able to read and understand or have read to them, and they can answer questions about. AI today cannot do it. And yes, it's going to get better fast. But, there's a lot of hurdles we need to cross from a technology perspective to get there. ChatGPT is actually based on technology that's been around for quite a while, but they've packaged it really well, made it, democratized it. On your question around bias, it's a good question, right? So there are examples today. So there was an AI tool that was used in criminal justice. It was a little bit of an experiment to see if we can sort of, to get rid of bias, human bias, that the thought was, could we actually have AI using several data points sort of predict the rate at which we think a criminal may reoffend? And then that sort of rate will then affect sentencing. So the higher the likelihood that somebody will reoffend, the longer the sentence, for instance, the harsher the sentence, versus if we think there's sort of a good case to reform. Now, the interesting thing about that is you have to look at what data is being used to train those models. And the data that's been used to train those models are effectively the judgments, it's been fed sort of what previous human judges have thought, right? Unfortunately, there is bias in that data. And so what you had was, in general, judges were given harder, longer sentences to people of color versus not for similar crimes. And then the AI is trained on that data, and in turn is then, recommending longer sentences based in part, largely in part, on sort of the color of someone's skin and not whether or not there's a high likelihood of reoffending. And so that's sort of the bias in, bias out. So there's no motivation behind the AI system, but the data that it's trained on causes it to have that biased approach. And so there's biased data, there's incomplete data, inaccurate data. And all these things are problems that today we don't have a good solution for. So a lot of AI is trained using data that is scraped from the internet. So literally, companies go there and they just scrape from social media, from websites, similar to how like Google or search bots scrape the internet to get data to answer search questions. They get that data, and then they train AI using that data. Now, for anyone who's been on the internet in any capacity for any time, you understand how sort of inaccurate, how biased, how potentially racist, sexist, any number of ists, right? A lot of data is out there. And so you then use that data to train AI, and that's a problem. So there's a few people, Timnit Gebru is one of them. She was she was at Google as an ethical AI. She was an ethicist, and she's doing her own thing now. And part of what she's pushing for in a really, really strong way is to have standards for the data that's used to train AI, to make sure that it is diverse. So to give a very simple example of how, like, in Google, if you searched previous to like 2 years ago in Google for images of a mother, 95+% of images of a mother was of a Caucasian lady with a child. And that was just not, and we all know that mothers come in all races, right? But it just turned out to be that because of that was the data that, that the Google was sort of, bots were scraping from the internet. That's what's presented, and AI does similar things. And so she's pushing very hard. So one of the things is, how do we sort of build standards for what data can be used to train AI? and also to sort of make sure that these things are documented. That what are you, the data used is documented and can be it's open and transparent, so that we are understanding where there may be potential bias and we can correct for that. There's a bunch of things now with reinforcement learning, with human feedback, and what that effectively is saying, can we actually use humans to go and teach AI what is sort of right or not? So after AI sort of comes up with an answer, there's a human who can actually go and say, okay, good answer, bad answer, you need to sort of course correct. And so there are different approaches that can be used, but I think the first thing and most important is that we need to have that conversation of what the biases are and the potential implications, and then go try to solve them. I don't think that the answer is always really about, not, just sort of passing legislation immediately and that sort of thing, but it's really truly about starting with the understanding component.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And Cameron, is there anything else you wish to add to what Glenn just articulated?
Yeah, I think something that just to add to the bias side of things, is that there are instances where, while the AI is scraping internet from scraping data from the internet, and so, and it's, I guess some of the data is in the bias, but some of the people that are training the models are in fact training the models based on their own personal biases as well. So there is bias coming from two and one, the data that is being trained. So I think Glenn mentioned earlier on, when we speak about a natural language processing, right? And when the AI and machine learning, when the AI is taking the data and parsing that data, breaking it down into its simplest form to understand language and speech pattern and so on and so forth. The people who are training the data are inputting their own biases into the data, and that's what we are getting back. So, for example, Glenn mentioned, if you were to enter into Google and type in like mother, you might get, let's say, a Caucasian mother. The same thing, if you were to go into Google right now and you were to type in successful person, it's the same result. You're going to get a Caucasian male as showing up in the first response, right? So that's part of the AI conversation that is, I guess, is of concern. The path surrounding the biasness of the data that's going in, which is the reason why we need to get more diverse people involved in training AI models to sort of avoid some of these biasness that we're seeing.
Absolutely. And now we are going to, and before we segue into the next aspect of this conversation, I'm going to share an image here. This image, let us look at this image. This is Pope Francis. This is the Holy Father, as is called by Catholics. That is their spiritual leader. This image went viral on social media a few months ago, and everyone was saying, yeah, the Pope is stylish, look at him with his expensive swag. And I looked at that image and I said, I do not know, first of all, that Rome is that cold at that time of year, and two, I do not know that people of the religious order, Catholics in that part of the world, wear that kind of swag, especially Pope Francis. He's not into brand name type of clothing. This was actually a deep fake. This was a deep fake. Yes, this was not a real image. And this was actually generated by by one of the AI deep fake generators. And so, Kimran, I'm going to tee this up with you here, because you work in the content creation space, the digital space here. What concerns do you have in respect of shall we call it intellectual property in that space? I think that is a major concern that people have, right? That you can manipulate people's images, you can manipulate people's original content. How do you protect against that?
So no, that part is a very tricky. That part is very tricky to sort of guard against, which is why what some of the AI tools are doing is that's where the AI ethicists comes into play now, to try to get the AI programmers and the people who are building the AI models to encourage the users of the AI systems and tools to be transparent about the use of AI, because the truth is, I can because of the text to image generation models like Midjourney, Blue Willow, Adobe Firefly, I can just enter a prompt, a text prompt, and it can generate an image for me. I can put that out there, and
I can create art. I can be
exactly.
Pablo Picasso.
Exactly, and there is nothing really that could prevent that at the moment. Which is so. For example, one of the AI tools from Adobe Firefly, if you generate an image using Adobe Firefly, it actually puts a label on that image saying that this image was created using AI. Now we can always crop out that kind of watermark on the image that was generated. But there is a concern. I am particularly concerned that the images can be generated, and there isn't anything in place at this moment that I can think about, or I can come up with, that can really, I suppose, take action against somebody creating an image, let's say of Pope Francis or of anybody else, and that is a particular concern. But I mean, I think AI generated images are easier to understand. I think the one that has me most concerned really is the voice generated image, because you have
the
tools like
deepfake voices, yeah.
Exactly, and then we have consumer facing tools like 11 Labs, where you can take a voice sample of somebody on YouTube, for example, feed it to the AI 11 Labs, and you can type in the text, whatever you want the voice to say, and I can have Dr. Kellam Bob saying something, whatever I want him to say, if I have a sample of his voice from the Bubb Report. That's the one that I'm really concerned about. But as of right now, that's the reason why there needs to be the AI ethicist, and so is very important, which is another new career that's being developed, so that we can have a little bit more transparency surrounding AI and our use of AI tools. It really comes back to transparency and how we use AI. Because remember, AI is a tool, and it's how we use it. We can use it for good, or we can use it for bad.
Glenn?
Yeah, no, that's right. Some potentially scary times, right? And I think for me, the danger is we're talking about like Hinton and sort of there's a set of people like Case, the Center for AI Safety, who sort of have sounded alarm bells about AI. And I think this conversation we're having now is really the more realistic sort of things that are likely to happen in the short term versus AI taking over. It's more of AI being used as a tool to perpetuate bad. Right. And so using this deepfakes, for instance, you could potentially have nuclear war as a result, right? Where there's apparently some nuclear powered country, some leader of that country is announcing a launch, right, of nuclear. Now, they're a lot more fail safe than that, right? But, there are cases in which you can envision using deepfakes to cause great harm. But interestingly, again, like every disruption, every sort of negative, there's a potential positive. And there's actually industries that have stood up now, and companies that are a bunch of startups that are starting in this case to sort of be able to identify deep fakes. I actually came across one just yesterday. In addition, right, I think the other bit here for us is sort of going with education. So Dr. Bubb, you said when you saw that image, you sort of applied what maybe critical thinking to some degree. Right.
Yes.
And I think that's lost in all of this noise here, is that we have to, as this thing becomes more prevalent, sort of train ourselves and train those around us and train the next generation to think critically and not to be reactive. And it's so easy to be reactive in this world because you post something on social media and it spreads in no time. But if everyone sort of takes a moment to pause, right? So education, I believe, is a part of it, to sort of think about what's the likelihood of this thing happening and the implications before sharing and before sort of going viral. I think, in the long term, we'll see that happen, but not anytime in the short term. So it is a concern, and we don't have a great answer today.
And yes, and in respect of deepfakes, I mean, I think that is such a critical area. And yes, you say that those of us who apply our critical thinking lens, but even critical thinkers would share images like that on social media. And so what happens with virality, as my communication expertise taught me, is that falsehoods tend to spread faster than the course correction for that. So
that's right.
You would spread a deep fake image, but when someone comes out to correct the record here, no one cares about that at that point. It's already had its effect.
Yep.
Its desired impact, right? Korean, would that be fair?
That is correct.
Yeah, absolutely. Now let us now segue into, and then we'll get to some viewer comments. Viewers, we see your comments here, so we'll definitely get to those comments here. But let us talk about disruption in the employment industry as we know it, especially in the Caribbean, because of course our program is catered towards a Grenadian and Caribbean audience. Let us talk about those potential disruptions, Glenn. And what do you predict that perhaps jobs that AI might be taking versus jobs that it would be creating?
Yeah, it's a good question. And so talking about disruptions, what's interesting in the sort of, if you sort of contrast the Industrial Revolution that Cameron previously mentioned, is you had a lot of, typically sort of blue collar jobs being sort of replaced potentially with automation. In this wave of AI, knowledge workers are actually more likely to be impacted, right? Meaning if you are a paralegal, right, or a lawyer, if you are an accountant, potentially, a lot of these things now can be done with high levels of accuracy by AI, meaning a lot of the research that a paralegal might be doing, a lot of the writing that you might be doing as a content creator, for instance, a lot of that can be replaced with either generative AI or some sort of models that are able to sort of handle your books for you. Given the data, they could sort of handle your accounting and produce the reports and detect potential areas of fraud, etc. And so you have potentially a lot of white collar jobs, that could be impacted. In fact, I know we're talking about the Caribbean here, but I think this trend will follow. I think the May report, jobs report in the US, for the first time included a line that was dedicated to losses due to AI. And there were about 4,000 jobs in the US in May that were lost due to AI. And it's generally in this journalism, by the way, is another area that is ripe for disruption. In fact, a lot of those jobs were journalists, like CNET, I think, fired a bunch of journalists and had AI write articles.
Yeah, you had CNET, you had BuzzFeed.
Yep. And then they had to reverse, by the way, on some of that,
Yeah.
because there were some issues with plagiarism, etc. And so these industries, so when I think about like newspaper industries, journalism, paralegal, content creators, all these are ripe for disruption. Now, I think we can think of disruptions in two ways, right? One is the negative impact, right? Disruption by its nature sounds negative and has negative impacts. But there's also like the other side of it, which is the opportunities. And so as we start thinking about those jobs that are getting displaced, we have to start looking towards the future. And some of that is longer term future, where we have to think about our education system and how we train people to be thinkers, because honestly, no one and anyone who claims to say otherwise, I think you should stay away from, but no one knows where this is ultimately going. We actually have no idea. Well, we have ideas, but we don't know with certainty. And so what we have to do is not train people for like, oh, what's the next job, right? Because that job may actually disappear in the next few years. It's really training people to how to be thinkers, how to be learners, how to be creators. And we could go, that's a whole other topic. And so we have to take a long-term view on the education system in Grenada and the Caribbean as a whole. But in the short term, there are things that we can do in terms of looking at, like I mentioned before, prompt engineering is one thing. Data labeling is another thing. Because data is key to all these systems, they actually need humans to be able to label data so machines can learn. You label and say, hey, this is a car. This is what a car looks like. These are the feature. And between like prompt engineering and sort of data labeling, these are things that actually don't require super specialized degrees. They don't require degrees in computer science or coding sorts of things. So you could actually people should start educating, start playing with these tools, start thinking about, in any problem that we have today, can AI be a tool that we can use to solve it, right? And just having that AI first approach mentality, I think, there's no reason that everyone here could play with ChatGPT and see if you can make your job a little bit easier, a little bit faster, or Copilot to sort of be more productive when you're trying to do analysis in Excel, etc. But it's really, I think, short term looking at jobs that are rising that may not require a lot of training, and there are a few of those, and then longer term looking at how do we set ourselves up for the long term future in terms of educating people in AI space, but more generally in how to think instead of what to think.
Mm-hmm. And Kimran, I'm going to bring you in here because incidentally, you just completed a conference in Grenada, a social media and AI marketing masterclass. I believe it was a 3-day event. And I'm sure those issues also cropped up in respect of what that artificial intelligence driven workforce would look like.
Yes, interestingly enough, two people walked up to me after we had the AI discussion, and they said to me, I am not normally, when they go to like a workshop, class, whatever it is, they will go back and report to their employers. And so what it is that was discussed, what they did. And they said to me, I am not telling my employer anything about this AI thing. That's what they said to me. I am not going to go back and tell my employer about ChatGPT.
Because their job would be on the line. Yes.
Right. So they told me that. But the thing about it is, what we have to do is we have to find ways to use the AI technologies to make us more efficient, to supercharge us as individuals. So I know we said that, there's going to be a lot of jobs on the line with AI. Now, here's the thing, though. It's not just that AI is going to take your job. The AI is not going to take your job. Your job will be taken by somebody who's using AI, which means that we now have to be up to speed with the different AI technology, understanding artificial intelligence, understanding the tools that are present, and how can we, I think they call it reskilling. How can we reskill ourselves for the labor market that exists? Jobs will be displaced, and we could complain about AI taking our jobs. We could be emotional about it, or we can be realistic about it and look at what's happening and react to what's happening, as opposed to, I guess, complaining about it happening. So what I would say is yes, and I know some of when I introduced some of the different AI tools and what they're capable of, what they can do, some of the participants they were in awe. They were like, "Wow, like we didn't know." I mean, some of them were like, "You know what? Like this is just gonna make my job 10 times easier." Some of the people who are involved in like PR, who like write press releases and so, they were saying to me, "Okay, well, great. Now I don't have to take an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours to write a press release anymore. I can now do it in a few minutes with ChatGPT or with Bard or with Forefront.ai." So I would say that while the AI has the potential to displace jobs, it also has the potential to supercharge you as a human being and make you more efficient and more effective in your job.
On that education piece, again, to piggyback on what Glenn said here, how do we prepare the next generation of Grenadian students to embrace these technology? Obviously, most of them would be digital natives, but in respect of as an applied tool, how does the education system prepare these next generation of the current students who are in school, even higher learners? You don't have to be in school, but how do we, again, reskill and retool to ensure that the human element is still relevant in this period?
I think one of the things that we have to understand is, especially in the Caribbean, we are heavy consumers of technology. We are not producers of technology. So we have to move away from the consumption end of technology and get into the production end of technology. And I think there needs to be an overhaul of our education system. It's not just saying, "Oh, let's do a workshop here or let's do a workshop there." There needs to be a transformation of the mindset towards digital and artificial intelligence. So we need to do a total overhaul of our education system. How are we educating our people for the next generation? And that's where, for example, government needs to set policies and pass policies, put that in place to say, okay, well, we are going to start training our people for this new world that is coming. And like starting from as early as I said, the primary school level. There's a lot of things that we're taught right now at the primary school, secondary school level that is pretty much sort of irrelevant the moment we step out of the walls of those schools. So we need to start with understanding that the kind of transformation that we need in the education system starts with the mindset of the people. Digital transformation, for example, many people think that digital transformation is about technology, when really and truly digital transformation is about a new way of thinking, because the technology is going to be there. The technology is always present. Technology will evolve, whether we are prepared for it or not. Technology has been evolving, but the problem that we've been having is we are not embracing the technology, because the persons that are making the policies, designing policies, and so I suppose maybe they're not I guess, like I say, digital natives to really embrace that technology. So as it relates to education, we need to first do an entire overhaul of our education system. We need to put policies in place to say, okay, our education system needs to be part of it. There needs to be a digital first sort of approach to things. We need to start ensuring that our young people from a very early age are exposed to the potentials of what can happen with digital technologies, with digital applications, and really embrace and like put that in front of them, and so that they are exposed to it very early, and not wait until this thing is here, and then we're trying to play catch up. So I think we need to be proactive and not like reactive when it starts happening.
And what we will do now, gentlemen, is that we'll get to some viewer comments here. And we have some interesting thought-provoking comments that are already coming in. Mr. Brand Grimes is asking, can AI reduce human intelligence? Think of the human brain as a muscle. Can AI regress human beings training their minds as a result of a technological dependency? That is an excellent question. Because these days, you do not have to calculate using your brain what a particular percentage of something is. You just go on an app and do that, right? So who wants to take a stab? Glenn, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. It's a great question. I would actually say it's a little bit, in my mind, much worse than that, right? Meaning, forget AI for a minute, right? Just these things in our pockets. I think have the ability to reduce human intelligence, right? Because what we do a lot, to Cameron's point, is consume. We consume and we consume and we consume, and we don't engage in critical thought. And so I've actually had even on my phone, I've now set limits for myself to at least be aware of my usage, because sometimes I'm shocked, right? And so the more we could sort of, I think, so this is where, as Cameron was talking about the education system and about upending that and introducing sort of, natively digital sort of thoughts and curriculums, right? I sort of go back and I may be a harlequin here, but I go back to what we need to do is teach people to think and not what to think. And yes, we're going to have tools that are grounded in sort of where we think we're going, right? So we're going to have to teach people how to use certain tools. But in fact, really, people are going to figure out how to use the tools, because, my children figure out everything way before I do, when it comes to technology. But the point is, if we teach people how to think and really ground that in a set of principles around that, I think that the problem becomes less severe. But to the question here, absolutely. Like, I think we have to be careful that we are not just consumers. We could either use a tool for good and for bad. If the tool is purely used from a consumption perspective, so anything we want, we go look it up and we stop there, I think that's bad. However, if we sort of used like ChatGPT, so you have a paper to write, right? People are going to use ChatGPT, like it or not, within the education system. Use ChatGPT, sure. But then the teacher shouldn't be grading the paper as written. Maybe it's really based on a presentation about that paper, where you actually ask questions and make it more interactive to see if there's a level of understanding about what was written. And so I think we have to sort of up the bar. It's no longer about just regurgitating facts. It's about, do we understand the implication of those facts? Can we sort of not just talk about historically, but can we project forward? What are the implications of what we sort of just learned moving forward, potential implications in society? And so as we think about changing education systems, as we think about these sorts of things, we have to think about the ways in which we sort of be able to sort of measure and encourage understanding versus rote memorization of knowledge. So I would say definitely a risk, and we have to figure that out.
Cameron?
Yes, I'm in agreement with everything that Glenn said. I also want to point out another side to that. So I do agree with what Mr. Grimes said, and I do agree with what Glenn said. There is also, we have to also understand that the AI, the person who's using the AI, needs to know exactly what they want from the AI. So the critical thinking and the creativity, one needs to have it in order to tell the AI what to give it back. So in terms of the becoming less intelligent, there is that effect happening in one place because, for example, calculators and so it can be argued that the calculator is also making us less intelligent, but we have to also remember that we are the ones that have to tell the AI what we want. So I need to be able to be able to think critically and come up with the prompt. I mean, Glenn speak about prompt engineering as a new career that's coming up as a result of AI. So the individual, the human being, still has to think, okay, what is it that I want? How can I craft this prompt in a way that the AI gives me back the response that I need? That's one thing. The second thing is that we have to remember that the artificial intelligence tools, they do not always give us correct information. Right, and if you look at ChatGPT and some of the other tools,
correct. I use
tell you
ChatGPT. It's not. It's just
exactly.
it's a glorified Wikipedia in so many ways.
Thank you. So it will tell you that, okay, some of the information that I'm giving you might be garbage. It might be incorrect. So now you, the individual, has a level of intelligence to know, okay, this doesn't make any sense. This is incorrect. So that's the reason why we cannot solely depend on just using the AI tools and technologies by themselves without applying any of our intelligence. So we have to apply human intelligence and artificial intelligence together in order to get the most effective output from AI. So while we can argue, there is an argument to be made that it's making us less intelligent, there's also a counter argument to that that can be made in the sense that there still needs to be an element of human intelligence being applied. If not, then we can run into trouble because, again, the AI does not always give us something that makes sense, and it's up to us to be able to go through and decide that makes sense, that doesn't make sense. That's the reason why we have to know exactly what we are talking about before we ask the AI to generate any kind of response for us.
Let's get to another comment. Bob Marisho is saying, and this to you, Kimran, the scammers are using that technology to impersonate banking companies and others to pick your pocket or to get PI. I'm not too sure what that last terminology is. Thoughts, gentlemen, of that?
It is true. Scammers, whenever there's an advancement in technology, the scammers will find ways to manipulate it and exploit it for their own benefits. With or without AIs, scammers will be scammers. Unfortunately, like we say, the AI is a tool that people can use. People can use it for good. People can use it for bad. The scammers are going to use it for bad, and it's just that the AI is kind of making it a little bit easier. There is a report of somebody would have contacted a parent, a mom, and said that they kidnapped the daughter of the mom, and they actually used a deepfake to clone her voice and have the daughters in the background talking, and the daughter was somewhere else, like maybe in school or wherever, and they were able to say, okay, we kidnapped her, we want so amount of money, and the mom was convinced that they had taken the daughter, and well, eventually she didn't give them the money, but it just goes to show that those technologies can and will be used in ways to sort of make to scam people and do all sorts of nefarious things. And that's why we need to have mechanisms in place to try to mitigate some of those things.
And we have another viewer comment. Dr. Bubb, can Glenn John at some point in the program speak on how AI has aided medical technology and where it plans to go? Glenn, any thoughts on that?
I'm not disclaimer, I'm not an expert in sort of the AI medical field. I will say a couple of things. IBM IBM has Watson, which is their, supercomputer. It's one that sort of won on Jeopardy, that was referenced earlier in the conversation, that beat the human player. And it's sort of a big part for Watson for IBM plans years ago was to actually get into the medical field, and they had huge announcements and partnerships with hospitals and medical institutions to get into that. And the idea being that you could use AI to both detect issues by looking at scans and medical test results, and sort of be able to potentially get things that humans have missed. This has turned out to be a rather hard field, and let me give you a sense, right? So everybody here uses the internet because you're on it. And I'm sure you've seen capture or recapture, where you're on a site and they ask you to prove you're not a machine by writing.
I'm not a robot. Yes.
Yeah, you're not.
Traffic
yes,
lights, cars.
Exactly. Now, humans can easily identify that just like immediately. Like you see it and you say, okay, that's a number, that's a car, that's a traffic light. The reason they ask that is because bots and machines cannot. It is very hard. Like computer vision is actually a very tough problem to solve, both from a hardware and software perspective. And so what's happening is that we are using those things to eliminate machines. If you think about the medical industry and looking at test results that are just not numbers, but if you're looking at like an X-ray scan or something to detect anomalies, that is a similar problem that you're facing. And it's a really hard problem that we haven't made great progress on. And so it's really, really hard there. The other thing, again, is the training data. So even with Watson, they found that they were actually decent enough, not quite as good as humans, human doctors, in identifying like skin conditions for Caucasians, but not for people of color, again, because of the training data set. And so there are a host of problems there. I don't know where it's going. I think there's a bunch of AI companies that have started recently that are looking to actually do a little bit more on the data side, less image. And so we'll see where that leads. But I don't know. But I'm not super optimistic in the short term for advances in the medical area using AI. It's a really hard problem to solve, and the stakes are high if you get the diagnosis wrong. So you still need to pair sort of human partnerships there.
And Mr. Grimes, I'm glad you what was it, the question, Mr. Grimes? Yes, on the health question. In fact, we're having a part 2 to this conversation, and we will be bringing in an Oxford-trained AI expert who is from Trinidad and Tobago. He's a Rhodes Scholar. He's actually doing a lot of work in the AI and health space. So look out for that in early July. He's very busy now, but he's promised us that he and his folks, a couple of researchers in Silicon Valley from the Caribbean, will be coming on the Bubb Report to talk about that as a part 2. So yes, go ahead, Kimran.
Dr. Bob, if you will permit me to just add to what Glenn mentioned about the healthcare part.
Yes.
Because I have encountered a company, actually one of my professors at the university is the CEO of a healthcare company that uses elements of AI, and how they do it is they use AI to improve health accessibility. So for example, telemedicine, right? So telemedicine platforms enables like remote consultations and provide medical services to areas that are pretty much underserved, where, for example, doctors cannot go. And another thing that they're doing is using some of those telemedicine and AI platforms to diagnose, like from afar, certain conditions that people might be suffering from. They share patients' data. Another thing that this particular company is doing is they're creating a sort of I guess a community where doctors can go, and if, for example, if somebody came across a unique sort of disease or defect in somebody, they can access this particular platform to see if any other doctor would have uploaded data or information about something similar, and they will access that data based on this unique thing that they're seeing, because somebody might be doing this maybe surgery in the Caribbean, and they've never seen this before. but then somebody in, let's say maybe India, might have had an encounter with it, and through this platform, that person in India could upload the data based on what they're encountering, because it might be new to them, and that person in the Caribbean could access it. So two things is happening. We get like kind of like a shared data happening, and also there is the telemedicine, which provides healthcare accessibility through AI to areas of the world that are very underserved. So that's some of the that's just from my experience with that particular company. But like Glenn, I'm not like a health AI expert.
Well, perhaps you can have Chat GPT write a diagnosis. I'm just kidding. It's a joke. I'm not supposed to be encouraging the use of Chat GPT. Gentlemen, we have to quickly get to the next segment, but I want to offer an opportunity for closing comments. I mean, this conversation can go on and on. It's an extremely exciting time to be alive. You've heard the terminology, what a time to be alive. What a time to be alive, to see these evolutions in real time. So Glenn, thank you again for obliging. Glenn, I know it's early on the West Coast. So thank you for waking up so early in the Pacific Northwest to be here with us. But over to you for some closing comments, sir.
Yeah, no, thank you for having us. I love the discussion, and I think it's a discussion that just needs to continue and turn into action. I would say, I'll piggyback off something you just said there, which is like, you're not supposed to be recommended ChatGPT. And I know you're sort of saying that a little bit facetiously, but yes. The thing I would really recommend is sort of, again, just as a thought exercise, as we go about our daily lives and we encounter problems, like take a step back and think about, like, can AI help make me more efficient, more productive? Right. As I see things cross, my WhatsApp groups all the time. So I just saw one the other day for some competition, Innovate to Win. There's a $30,000 competition for ideas in agro-processing and agro-tourism. And I would love to have people sort of leverage things like ChatGPT to write proposals, right? To do research and write proposals and sort of use those tools. Similarly, we should start thinking even about, so when we look at weather systems in the Caribbean and in Grenada, whether it's storms, hurricanes, or just heavy rainfalls, like how can we sort of both do data collecting to understand the topography of the island and what sort of soil we have and tree cover, and feed that into models that can be predictive of where landslides are likely to happen, right? So now we're talking about public health and safety. And so there's a lot that we can do. So I just want to leave folks thinking about maybe a couple of things. One is like, just start playing with these tools and technologies as you go about your daily lives, because I think you'd find a lot of benefit in them and you'd learn. And two, we have to start having that dialogue about education in a sort of a real way. We've been, in a previous segment with you in a different forum, we spoke about sort of STEM and education in Grenada. And this is, to me, is an extension of that. And so I think throughout Grenada and the Caribbean, we really have to start making critical steps in reforming education, because that is really the only way, scalable way, the only scalable way to get us from where we are to where this unknown future, but where we know we need to sort of start moving. And so just thank you again. And thank you to my co-guest here, Kimran. It was a great discussion, and looking forward to continuing it.
Absolutely. Believe me, I would be calling on you, gentlemen, for your expertise and your knowledge in this area. Cameron, over to you for some closing comments, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bo, for having me on the program. I know you mentioned, like Glenn said, you're not encouraging the use of ChatGPT.
It was actually tongue-in-cheek, because I actually, full disclosure, and maybe some of my students are watching, we actually use ChatGPT as a tool. My institution, we decided to, of course, we do have guardrails in place, but we have decided to embrace it. And I was having this conversation on Background with Glenn, was that depending on the nature of the course material that is being taught, the students came to the conclusion that, look, this is only a tool. I mean, this is not really substantively teaching me anything that I couldn't find on Wikipedia. So we have embraced it as an institution, and we have said, you know what? We know that the students are going to use it. So there is no need saying to the students, oh, don't use ChatGPT because, this particular paper is going to go through a plagiarism check. Of course, it will go through a plagiarism check. And there is software to also deflect that. So what do you do at this stage? Okay, you have to be able to ensure that as professors, as I am, that we are nimble and flexible enough to incorporate that tool as a learning tool, but that it does not take away from the specific rubrics that are being taught in the classroom, that the students would still use the rubrics, because the ChatGPT function would not be able to leverage those rubrics that we're using in the classroom in any way, shape, or form. So go ahead, Kimberly. So that was the context of that joke.
No, I'm glad, because what I wanted to do was sort of highlight something, because it's important, because I think that we tend to use like ChatGPT without any doing any further checks. And like we mentioned earlier on, ChatGPT can in fact give us some like really garbage output. So in that context, we have to be very careful when using ChatGPT. I do encourage in a business context that ChatGPT is used, and so, but even then, we have to be extremely careful. If you don't need to use it, then don't use it. But it's very helpful. But as some closing remarks, what I will say is, I will want to say to people, don't be afraid of the AI tools that are out there. Don't be afraid to explore AI. Don't be afraid to check them out, to use them, to test them out, to see how they can make your life easier. The more we hide from AI, or the more we decide we're not going to use AI, the more we say AI is evil or whatever it is, the more we are setting up ourselves for being displaced or being replaced by somebody using AI. So my encouragement to everybody would be, don't be afraid of AI. It is here. It is not going anywhere. AI has been here as early as since the mid 20th century. AI is now just being exacerbated by advancements in machine learning, in natural language processing. We're now seeing more large language models like GPT 3.5, GPT 4, and now GPT 5 that's coming in. We have now more computing power. We have big data, because everything is now the internet. So we have data being created at every touch point. Everything we do, we're generating data. So these things have, and also more investment into startups and research in AI. So these things are now making AI become a bit of a mainstream tool, but it has been there. It has been something that it has been coming. I would say use AI to supercharge yourself as an individual, to supercharge your business. Don't be afraid of it, and embrace it. Embrace AI. It's here. Let's not be emotional about how we want life to be, and let's react to how things are. That's what I would say.
Let us react to how things are. And on that note, gentlemen, thank you so much for appearing on the Bubb Report. Glenn, you ahead of me with that 75th anniversary shirt. I haven't got mine as yet, but I'll have a conversation with Mr. Jeremiah about that.
There you go.
All right, viewers and listeners, stand by. We'll be back for the final segment of the day.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity.
And viewers and listeners, welcome back for the final segment of the Bubb Report. Lorna Dale, welcome to the program again.
Good morning, Dr. Bubb, and thank you for having me. And good afternoon, actually, to your audience.
Yes, afternoon.
As well.
Yes, and today we are not talking archaeology today, although that would have been good. That would have been exciting. It's one of those things that excites me. But let us talk about the article, and I'm going to share the article that you published on LinkedIn last week, and then we will talk about it. We'll talk about why that you saw the need to publish that. Again, the title of the article is that Nepotism and Patronage Politics are Undermining Meritocracy in Grenada. You open up the article by saying a remarkable pool of talented educational professionals eager to contribute to their nation's development is unfortunately being sidelined. The reasons for this are far from obscure. A predominant culture of favoritism and nepotism often circumvents merit-based recruitment, privileging political affiliations over competence and qualifications. Why now? Why were you motivated to pen this piece now?
I suppose I'm actually doing some research, and oftentimes I try to stay away from conversations about politics because, particularly in Grenada, Grenadians are very emotional when it comes to politics. So I have tried to stay away from that. But in doing my research, I know that I need to put the data out there eventually. So that's just like, I suppose, touching tip of the iceberg for what's to come in terms of my research, my broader research.
So is this going to be a dissertation research? Is this a book? Is this a journal article? Where would this research be going? Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I'm a journalist, so that's what I do.
It's research.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Okay. That's all right. Yeah, and that's okay. So let us talk about what do you think contributes to this I suppose nepotism and patronage politics that you see.
Okay, for me to get started, let me first underpin my conversation about nepotism and politics in Grenada to say that it's a feature of our society. I mean, it's not new. We can go as far back to the colonial society, the plantation society, and we can start, if we want a starting point, we can start from, let's say, adult suffrage, and then we could say the emergence of Gary, when we look at groups and organizations and how they emerge historically in the Caribbean, right? It's always who you're connected to, who you know. We're going to form, let's say, a golf club, but it's only a particular group that is allowed to play golf. And we could examine the Grenada Golf Course if you want to. So it's nothing new. So this is not like a new topic that I'm talking about. But just to underpin that right there as part of my discussion, it's not something new, and we see it happening all over the world. So in the Grenadian context, one can argue is that not who you know, but who knows you. And I suppose we can go a bit deeper if you want.
Definitely, yes. So let's talk about that because one viewer of the Bubb Report, when we published the flyer for this segment, they said, well, Grenada is just one of many places where this happens. This is not, as you said, not new. But what do you think makes Grenada unique in terms of what your data is saying?
From what the data is saying is people are put in positions of power with a lack of knowledge, right? So I belong to a particular political party, I might have supported the party, my family would have supported the party, and so I get a position when that party is in power. When that party is out of office, or that administration is out of office, then I tend to lose that job or that contract, whatever I might have gotten during that time. So it has been systematically happening in our Grenadian society over a period of time. And so with the ideas for, let's say, new knowledge, because I get a particular position, because I'm affiliated with a particular political party or administration, I do not necessarily know how to do the job, right? But I got that particular position because of my association.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And how then does that serve to undermine meritocracy and development? Because there is a question of development there as well.
Right. The people who has the know-how or the education and the knowledge, and I'm not talking about education in terms of certification here right now, right? In this context, you can have the knowledge of how to do something, you want to serve, but you're not given those opportunities because you're not in contact or in connection with the right persons or the right institutions in the society. And so it can develop a feeling of resentment where there is no, we do not have equality. First of all, I would say there is no equity, right? So I'm not given the same opportunities with somebody who probably has the same, let's say, qualification or education, certification in some cases, like somebody else who doesn't have that qualification, but by dint of the fact of their political association, they are given that particular job, they are given that particular role. Or let's say a husband or wife is a political minister, and they can simply make a phone call and say, hey, I need a job for X, Y, and Z. I need a job for my daughter. I need a scholarship for this person. And so if you go in to get a scholarship, for example, and you go through the scholarship desk, you may really, in fact, need it because you cannot afford it financially. What we see happening in some cases, the people who could afford it financially, their children get those scholarships, their children get those positions, or their companies get those small contracts, so to speak.
Absolutely. And in your article, you also mention that the implications of this, it's you said it's vast and profound. You say it undermines the concept of a meritocratic society, leading to disillusionment among qualified professionals who find their career trajectories stymied. Do you feel as if that there are many Grenadians who they get disillusioned with politics, one, but two, they're disillusioned by the fact that in spite of how hard they work to accomplish to achieve particular professional goals, that it is not rewarded in the way that it should be, just because of the nature of how polarized our society is.
Absolutely. I have friends who would have graduated with me in my undergraduate, and they are still out of work. And it's not that they're not trying. There are persons. They're not even working in their fields, and you see persons that they're in particular positions, and you wonder how. And when you do some more research, what we call it in the social sciences, when you do some more social inquiry, they do not have the qualifications. For example, as part of as we're in May, so in April, in gathering some data, there was a particular position that somebody applied to, and the interview went well. They said they was going to be contacted again, and they find within the week that it was supposed to be contacted, they weren't. So they did a follow up, and only to find out that somebody else got the job, and that person also happened to be that person's friend. She's like, oh, girl, you don't know what happened. I'm going to my dialect now. I didn't even apply for this job, and so and so tell me to send it in, and I get the job. The thing is, because of the connection, that they got that job. They didn't even have to go through the interview process. All they needed to do was, I suppose, submit their CV or their resume. And one can argue that, yeah, you know that person, you probably know their skill set, right? And so you probably prefer to work with that person. But then where do we find that balance? Like I said, there's no equality. Where do we find that balance when you have people in positions of power just putting their friends or their people who they're connected to within their own circles? When we argue and we say to students, go to school, study hard, and you're going to do great things. When do you do those great things if you're never given the opportunity to serve? And there's a lot of people that I know, like I said, I have people who graduate with me undergraduate, and they're still at home. They're doing their thing, they're hustling on the side, but at times it can become a bit frustrating when you see people who probably just leave school just the other day and they acquire that big position. Yes, they have the qualification as you, but you're not in the right circle or group, and that's what my data is really suggesting. So that was the purpose of penning that short piece.
Absolutely.
It became a bit overwhelming when you see and you know that people, they're trying, because when you go out in the field and you do research, sometimes you see what they're doing themselves. It can be a bit emotional. So I think that is why I just wanted to put it out there that there are people, and we should probably really give people fair chances. If we're gonna tell you to work hard and you did all the work, why aren't you able to serve?
Absolutely. And there are some comments here. Margaret Francis is saying some may simply say that that's the power of networking and the use of social capital, or I may go further to say that is the use of political capital. Some might say that's just par for the course. That's you do not want to have people in positions that do not reflect the objectives of your particular political party when they get state power. Your thoughts on that idea?
That might be the case. However, if we're thinking about Grenada, right? When do we draw that line again? If we want to take Grenada on a particular trajectory, and I may support, let's say, a particular political party, and my party is out of office, and I do not do the job, who is suffering there? Is it the administration, or is it the country? Because there are certain systems or mechanism in place that we need to get to point A to point B to point C so we can get the outcome. And if every time a political party comes into office, there's some stagnation, are we really going to see development in that case? So sometimes we have to think about the bigger picture. And I suppose for me as an individual, the bigger picture is always Grenada. So yes, my party may not be in office. The political the group that I'm working with, they might be, as they say, on the other side. But you're being paid for a particular job. So do that, do it to the best of your ability, and then we can take the country to different levels. And for me, how we do that, it starts in the mind. It's a mindset. Right? If we don't change a mindset and making everything about politics, because outside of politics, we all have to survive. I was just recently reading a post on Facebook that this person is asking for another person to be removed because they probably would have supported the last administration. And to me, that is so unfair. If the person is really good at their job and they're doing it and they're executing it, why remove them? They still have a family to feed. They have bills to pay like everybody else is. So we need to get rid of that, I suppose, that dogmatic way of how we deal with each other. Because at the end of the day, when we strip everything, when we strip all the colors aside, it's just one thing we want to do: survive, provide for a family, and be healthy. So I suppose we need to think about this in the broadest concept. Remove our emotions from politics and really focus on the individual level.
How do you think? Please finish your thoughts, and then I'll ask a follow-up question. Go ahead.
We need to think when growing up in Grenada, for me, it took they say it took a village to raise a child.
To raise a child.
I'm not seeing that. It's really cutthroat and eat a food mentality, and we want this one. Okay, our party's in power now. Let's do that. Our time now. It has to be everybody's time. We're all Grenadians. Yeah, so just give people the opportunities. They have the qualification. Search within the pool of the persons who are qualified to serve in the field. And not necessarily because you have position of power means you have the knowledge of the know-how. There are persons who can advise you, right? So you can have the position of power. Let's say a politician. You can be a minister of da-da-da. Let's say you can be the minister of, let's say, education. But what is your goal for education in Grenada? You may have a goal, but you may not know how to execute that. So you employ persons around you who are qualified to that level, who can take and who have the probably same vision. You support different political parties, but again, the bigger picture has to be about Grenada. So how do we take our knowledge and our skill set to drive that agenda of, let's say, revamping the education system, so to speak?
Absolutely. Yeah. And what you're saying here is very similar to what the current prime minister said before the election campaign, but in respect of some of the appointments that happened on various boards, that did not play out because a lot of the people who were appointed were in fact political people that supported his party. Let us get to another comment here. Shane is saying this brings about a situation where thousands of dollars are wasted when truly this can be used to add to true salaries of the lower earning workers that are established in the civil service that are struggling to make ends meet, even getting to work on a daily. I'm not sure I'm following the trend there. Yeah, but just to respond to, of course, there is a gentleman here, Mr. Richard Holstein. Hello, sir. I don't know who you are, but I will put your comment up. And you say, out of the blues, all of you talking when the previous government was in office, none of you said anything. You said you have been doing this research as a historic, and you place this in a historic context. So you're not talking about this in today's context, correct?
Exactly, absolutely. And that's why I say people get
emotional and they get personal. They get very personal. They want to cuss you. For these politicians, who, by the way, are friends. Deacon Mitchell and the gentleman who ran for the NNP in St. George's Northeast are best of friends. But here you are, Grenadians, whether it's down in the market square, whether it's in the mall, on the street, they're stretching their lip as far from Point Saline to Petit Martinique and getting offended over comments that politicians make. When these politicians are friends, their children are friends. But please proceed.
Absolutely, and that is why I place this in a historic context. So and I prefaced it by saying, I mean, if we want a starting point, we could go back to adult suffrage, and if we examine the society, and people might have personal experiences where they know that this person get a particular job and they do not have the qualification, the experience, or the certification, right? But just because of their political affiliation. So I'm not sure, there isn't a question really there, so I'm not going to respond to it. It's just a statement.
No, it's a jibe, it's an attack, it's an ad hominem attack that happens where people, it's as if, history started last year on June 22nd, when in fact many issues, for example, that you have been raising those before June of last year.
I suppose this person does not isn't aware of me, but if they go back and see my writing on LinkedIn, it has been there and it has passed June 23rd, 2022. So this
and
has
that's
been
before that, correct? Absolutely, exactly. Yes.
This has been,
but let's talk about solutions now, and this will be the final question here. You talk about solutions because you also offered solutions. You are not only complaining, you're not one of those people who you complain, but you offer solutions to the problems. Yes. And one of the things you articulated here is that while the journey to dismantle deep-rooted system like nepotism and patronage politics may be challenging, it is essential for the prosperity of Grenada and its people. The task at hand is not merely about restructuring hiring practices, but about uprooting a deeply ingrained mindset that allows such practices to thrive. How do we do that? That appears to be a Herculean task here.
I know. I would go back to what two of your panels have said, and it's through education. Really, if I were to use, I guess, a phrase from this current administration, and they talk about that transformation agenda. For me, I would argue that transformation agenda starts with the mind. And when it starts with the mind, we would understand that because we both support different political parties, in this case, since we're talking about politics, our opinions can vary. It can differ, right? Because if we keep doing the same thing, all of us doing the same thing would be pretty boring, right? So if we change our mindset and understanding that, hey, I like coffee, you like tea, I personally don't use sugar, you love sugar, and we can break it down to the simple constituents, right? You like this political party and you have your valid reasons for supporting that particular party. On the other hand, I like this because I have probably personal experience. I might like the party philosophy, right? Not necessarily I like any personalities within the party, right? But I might agree with some of the points they might make in their manifesto, for example. And if I see there is some, I guess, some efforts in trying to execute what you said in your manifesto, then I might be a little bit more inclined to vote for that particular party. So if we just kind of restructure our mind and analyze it much deeper than what this party can do for me as an individual, but think of it in terms of the country. Where do we want to see Grenada 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 50 years? Right? We're going to celebrate independence in a year. Are we really celebrating independence?
You mean the 50th anniversary of independence?
Are we really celebrating independence? And I'm putting independence in, that's a whole different conversation. So for me, we have to go and your last two panelists sums it up adequately. Revamp our education system. Decide on the policies, decide on how we want to go. And politics is a continuum. So when a political party comes into office, we shouldn't disrupt what has been done in the last 5 or 10 years, but how we can enhance
that it should be a continuum.
How we can enhance it and make it more effective so that everybody can benefit. All Grenadians, whether you're blue, you're black, or green, purple, it doesn't really matter. Because at the end of the day, we're all Grenadians, and like I said, we all want the same thing. So if we start to reconstruct our minds, probably that's a starting point. And for me, it would be, I guess I'm an educator, it would be education. Because when I teach and I use examples from gathering my research, some of the students can relate to that, right? And then when they reach in difficult situations, they're now better able to deal with it. The problem is that when we do not want to accept an opinion that is different from ours, that's when it really becomes problematic. So true, for me, it would be education. I would start with education.
Let's get to two final viewer comments. I believe Mr. Ellis, thank you for articulating this for us. And you said, I'm simply saying when the government wastes thousands of dollars by employing persons, all because of nepotism and political patronage, when these persons simply do nothing and gets paid, these monies should be invested elsewhere by adding to the salaries of the lower income workers in the service who struggle to get to their desks daily. That is what Mr. Ellis was trying to say here.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Ellis, for clearing that up. Your thoughts on that, Laura?
Again, that could be a double-edged sword, and here's why. Now, if they're not doing anything, I mean, who's doing the checks and balances? Right? Who is really doing the checks and balances? And like I said, if we are really interested in the development of Grenada, Carriacou, and PT Martinique, at some point, not because we are popular, that an opportunity comes that we say, okay, I see you are, there are some good talkers, so we talk a lot. And because we talk good, everybody say, oh, this is the expert, this is the expert. And you're not really going to the expert. You're going to the talker. You're going to the person who has who's very popular because they talk a lot. And so if you're not going, right, if you're not going to the expert to really get the expert advice, then, I mean, checks and balances transparency. We have to be honest with ourselves. Are you capable of doing that job? Do you feel comfortable, or you just become numb that, hey, it's a paycheck and I have things to do? But I mean, if you really think about Grenada, you could be in the position, jobs where you learn on the job as you go along. When I started to teach, I was fresh out of my undergrad when I started to teach. But as my first semester was a bit awkward, and I improved, right? And I had to do my PowerPoints, and I had to make sure I have everything right. Now I can just go and talk about my subject matter because I know my subject areas, right? So if you're honest with yourself and you're doing this particular job, it takes care of you and your family. You might want to do something on the side, do a course. Develop. If you're just there doing it, and I suppose you have to put mechanism in place where you empower your workers. So it may not be a degree, but you might go to a workshop, and you get to learn how to do things more effectively. And again, it shouldn't be about, oh, my party is not in power, so I'm not doing anything. And I observe that in one of the ministries. And sometimes you go to the ministries and they're not aware, and they say a lot of wrong things that they're not supposed to say. So that will be coming out as part of my research as well, because they're not, I suppose, aware of the environment and who's around. Because at the end of the day, you don't know who supports what and what that person is really doing. Is they really going to the ministry to see a particular person, or are we doing social inquiry?
Absolutely.
Right,
are we doing social inquiry? That's and I know that some folks were reluctant to have you come on the report to discuss this, because I'm not sure if you want to talk about this, but on background, you did indicate that folks were saying, oh, don't go on the Bubb Report and talk about this. Grenada is so politically polarized. People going to cuss you. They're going to say this, that, and the third.
I had very close friends, and of course my immediate family, knowing how, like you say, how polarized it is when it comes to politics. And as I keep saying to my students, when certain things happen in society, when they experience, let's say, internal racism, for example, and they don't speak out about it, then how do we solve the problem? So I thought, on the one hand, I cannot be teaching for all these years about the particular things, and I myself not speaking out, because then I become a hypocrite. So I told them that it's really not my personal opinion that I'm going to speak about. It's what the research and what the data is saying, and the data don't lie. So I had to come and I just make that little point. We are paying attention. I guess the educators, the researchers, we are paying attention, and then we have a way of where history repeats itself. If we're not documenting it, then the future generation really would not know. And Grenada is a very, very fertile space for all types of research, but we're not writing about our history. We are still doing his story and what they tell us.
Colonial history, yeah.
You had a guest who spoke about Maurice Bishop. Who's documenting that? Why aren't we teaching that in our schools? Why are we learning about Columbus and history ships? Why are we learning? Yeah. And I'm going to put on my archaeological hat here now. Why are we still learning that the indigenous peoples jumped off Leapers Hill? Why we still have that spot? And that could be a different argument, because the archaeological data is saying differently, but we are not studying that. So we need to revamp our history. My grandchildren should not be using the same history text that my parents and myself or my grandparents used, for example. So it's I suppose it's about time that we document, because I'm saying, I'm looking for research or data about Grenada, and there isn't any. No, I'm a researcher, I'm a scientist, then I need to put my skill set to work, because 50 years from now, I may not be here, but that data will be there, published and written, so they can have some kind of historical context. And again, what we lack in Grenada is history, because here I prefaced my discussion on a particular historical perspective, but then somebody heard something totally different or ignored that.
Well, they heard that history started on June 22nd, 2022, whatever the election was, and nobody did anything before that. Nobody raised anything before that, because that's the lens through which some people see it, but that's not the case. And we have to call that out. We have to call that out when that happens. We cannot sit by and allow people to attempt to be revisionist in history in respect of how they critique others who raise concerns about issues that are affecting Grenadian society, because those calls have been done before the last elections. I can certainly speak to the work that you do as an archaeologist in respect of what has been happening up in St. Patrick's, in respect of the Breakwater Project, in respect of the Liver Project. You've appeared several times on the Bubb Report to address those issues before June of 2022. So I just thought that we needed to end on that note. Any other comments before we end the program?
I suppose for the us as Grenadians, now I'm not gonna make it. And not all of us live here, but the thing is, we not all of us live in Grenada. But the thing is, we do care about our country, and some way within. I guess I'm making a emotional plea here right now, and I was just talking about emotions earlier. Is that we have to know what we want for Grenada, Carriacou, and PT Martinique. Know where we are, where we came from, and where we want to go, and really restructure our mind and stop making everything about color, but more so about country. So instead of having a more patriotic approach, I would argue that we need a more nationalistic approach where we have equality, fraternity, justice, because our justice system, and then that's another conversation, is really not equal. Yeah, so I suppose what I really want for us is to think more about Grenada as opposed to thinking about self and our own, I suppose, our own legacies. It's important from a family perspective, but in a much broader context, we should really put Grenada first. And sorry, I'm not a patriot or a nationalist. So whoever is in power, whether I support that political party or not, I will be writing a lot more about it and doing the research and articulating. Because like I said, our history needs to be told, and we need to stop teaching it where we have to regurgitate dates. There's much more to history than just the dates that the colonizers would have given us. Yeah. So that's my say. That we put
Grenada first. Thank you so very much for your articulation today on the Bubb Report. Viewers and listeners, I'm your humble host, Dr. Kellen Bubb. I thank all of you for tuning in to the Bubb Report this week. If you have not shared the program, please do so. Earlier, we had a very rich and very educational, very deep conversation with Mr. Don Rojas, who was Maurice Bishop's former press secretary. This year, Maurice Bishop, the late Prime Minister, would have celebrated 79 years. In fact, Don Rojas played a pivotal role in a lot of the speeches that Maurice Bishop wrote and spoke. And it's located in this book. The title of this book is actually Maurice Bishop Speaks, and you can actually obtain a copy on Amazon for $20. It's $20 on Amazon. I was able to get my replacement copy a few years ago. It's a book that I reference a lot, and I also thank our AI panel for their very rich and vivid discussion around artificial intelligence. So on behalf of the producers of the Bubb Report, I'm your humble host, Dr. Kellen Bubb. We will see you next week for another installment of the Bubb Report. Take care now. Bye-bye. Hi, everyone. Thanks for checking out the Bubb Report's social media pages. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch our weekly live show, follow our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can catch repeat episodes on Wednesdays at 4 and 5 p.m. respectively on CRFM Radio and GBN TV in Grenada. We are also viewed on Sundays at 8 p.m. on WPG 10 throughout the Caribbean. Thanks for watching.